If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life.
And the basis of DISC itself is patterns. It's patterns of communication. It's patterns of behaviour. I always relate it to the fact that when you want to buy a new car, and it's a blue BMW or whatever it might be, the minute you see that car everywhere. You didn't see it before, but now everyone's got one. It's the same with DISC. Once you recognise the patterns, you can't help but see them everywhere.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with international speaker and leadership coach, Michelle Smith, about why good communication is one of the most essential tools of leadership and what your communication is really saying about you as a leader. Michelle Smith has spent over 3 decades in leadership in one form or another. She has won copious awards for her leadership in the UK and Europe, but perhaps one that she holds most dear is the recent time of leading a feeding and support charity for homeless and in-need families through COVID and beyond, which led her and her team to winning the honor of the King's Award, an MBE for voluntary groups where she had the privilege of meeting the King. You heard me right. She met the King, y'all, and she spent the afternoon at Buckingham Palace. Wow. Now, after 18 years in leadership and personally experiencing the taste of a toxic corporate culture, Michelle became fascinated with language and behavior, getting heavily interested in psychology and communication. And one of her focuses is absolutely on communication. The benefits of good communication, the nuances of micro behaviors, how to understand our own style of communication, how to recognize others' behavior patterns, and how to best engage. Michelle is now the director and owner of the Michelle Claire Smith organization that focuses on supporting companies and individual leaders in becoming genuine, people-centric, servant leaders. She believes that growing as a leader can make a difference in the workplace, in the community, and at home. The Michelle Claire Smith Company has a vision to ignite the leadership spark in every individual they come across, to teach life-giving superpower strategies, and watch as people power into their purpose without fear. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Michelle. I am so happy to have you.
Well, I am so happy to be here. Wow, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much for that.
Well, you are fabulous. I actually get the honor of knowing you personally. You and I are both leadership coaches, part of the John Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. And even though we are an ocean apart, we met at a John Maxwell International Conference and immediately hit it off. I feel like we are kindred spirits, like we're related somehow. I just know we have to be somewhere back hundreds of years ago. We got to be related.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was such a pleasure and an honor to meet you. And I do believe we'll be firm friends for a very, very, very long time. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited you're here today because you are a communication guru. And I know our listeners are like, come on, Bethany, you mentioned communication a lot. Here's why. It is one of the most important things in leadership. And it's also like the number one thing that people violate. We have bad communication, just bringing this toxicity into our cultures, into our homes even. And so, yes, I'm going to keep saying it over and over until the day I die. Communication matters. How we engage and interact with others matters. So that's why I wanted to have you on. You are a communication guru. And you're a certified DISC consultant. You go and you help organizations understand communication, personalities, and all of that. So I just kind of want to start back at the beginning, right? You've got 30 years in leadership. You stepped into a senior management role, leading over 250 employees in your early 20s.
I did.
I can't imagine being in my 20s and leading that many people. So I know that you have a ton of experience and probably a ton of stories. I want to know, what about that past? What about being in leadership, senior leadership so early? What have you seen? Like, what led you to becoming this guru in behaviors and communication?
Well, I mean, please, first of all, guru is a high expectation. I definitely am fascinated by communication and people's behavior. it intrigues me, and it intrigues me from, from that early age of 20 when I knew nothing other than a title. And at that point, I thought it was about the title. So, I was suddenly this kind of senior manager, and it was all about me and the chip on my shoulder, and you will do what I say. And sometimes that worked. And other times it really had no effect other than to rub people up the wrong way. And so I learned very quickly that if I didn't communicate in the right way, if I didn't influence people in the right way, I wasn't going to get any further forward, not just with my own career, but in helping them improve, in coaching them. So definitely those first years, those, I call them the informative years, were key. They taught me this: leadership is essentially influence and guiding others. And you can't do that if communication isn't the critical success factor.
Oh.
So it was almost by default, thrown into that role, that I realized what I needed to do quite quickly in order to succeed. I was treading water. I mean, it was beautiful that something was seen in me by somebody that would elevate me so quickly and so young. But the truth of the matter wasn't really equipped. And so I had to get equipped quickly. It's one of the things that, we teach now from my own organization is equip your leaders. Don't leave them flailing without the tools in their bag. And the first thing to teach them is how to communicate. And Bethany, you've invited me on this wonderful podcast, and I'm so excited. But the truth is, we could talk for hours and hours on communication.
So true.
So I think it's a really good idea to hone it down to just a couple of things. One, I really want to get to people the most important thing, which is how you think, is how you speak, is how you act, it's how you behave. So, I mean, it's really important to me. I've got a little quote here, and I like to read it out. The reason I read it out is because I never like to misquote anybody.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
But you will have heard of the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, and I probably have pronounced that incorrectly, being a communication guru. But he says this: watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And so I wanted to start with that. I also believe there's many passages in the Bible, and I am a Christian, Bethany, and that reflect on what we speak can bring life and death. And I know we'll probably talk about that later, but the words that we speak, the power that they have is phenomenal. But it all starts with the seed in the mind. So I think that's a really good place for us to start. What are we thinking about that drives our behavior and communication in the way we act?
That's so good. And just, as I'm sitting here thinking, I can't help but see like a diagram of an arrows, arrow flowing. It's our thoughts become our words become our actions become our habits. And I'm trying to remember, I hope I don't misquote here, but our actions, our habits become our character becomes our destiny. I think I got those because I saw the visual in my head, right?
Yeah.
It's so true. It's like, you can't just fix the end thing, can't fix your destiny. I'm destined to be a great leader. No, you got to back way the heck up and go to the root cause. And it's how are we thinking about things? And then you mentioned the Bible verse. I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but many times our guests pick the Bible verse that we share at the end of the show. And they choose, whatever's on their heart to share for the episode. But Michelle picked Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. And so, we know that how we speak engages with people, and it tells a lot about who we are and what those are. But take that wherever you want to run with it, Michelle, that Bible verse, the beginning with our thoughts, and help us become better communicators.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important that we start, at kind of the beginning, which is us. George Bernard Shaw, he said, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's happened. It's that we think we've communicated. We think we've communicated with our teams. We think we've communicated with our spouse. We think we've told our children what we expect. And then ultimately something else happens, and we're frustrated, and we're emotional, and we're annoyed, or we're let down, or we're frustrated. And that's why I want to start with the power of the mind, the power of the word, power of the action, because the power of the mind is the thought. I learn really quickly, and this is a personal experience really at home, that I could be frustrated every day with my husband if I wanted to, or I could think about the fact that had he meant it to be that way. So, for example, if he leaves his shirt or his shorts on the side every day and I'm picking it up, and every day I'm thinking, this is really annoying me, I'm really angry, my words are going to say, why do you always leave this here? You're so lazy. And I'm speaking that over him. I'm speaking that over him. He's lazy, he's useless. I do the same at work. This person doesn't bring me the work that I've asked them to do, and it's not great. And I'm saying to them, I'm saying to myself, first of all, well, what a waste of space that person is. They clearly can't grasp simple concepts. But the truth is, when I reverse that thought into, I don't think my husband is thinking, what would be a great idea is to frustrate Michelle on a daily basis. And I
True.
don't think that person in my team is thinking, I know, I'd really like to frustrate the boss.
Yeah.
She's asked me for this, but I'll deliver something else. So when I start to think about it differently, I can analyze the situation differently, and then I can communicate differently. I can say
That's
to my spouse, you know, when you leave your shirt there every day, it's a bit frustrating for me to pick it up. Would you mind if you pop it in the washing basket? Or inevitably, my husband will say, no problem.
yeah.
And then he'll do that. And guess what? I haven't spoken anything over him about being lazy. I haven't spoken anything bad about him that's caused conflict in my marriage. And in fact, I've dissolved the frustration for myself because I communicated more impactfully, because the words followed my mind. My mind twisted the situation. It
Yes.
changed the situation. When I speak to my team and I say, Cameron, Tony, whoever it might be, that work you've done for me, I maybe didn't communicate it very clearly. I've taken some accountability. I'm allowing them, by taking accountability, to be free in saying what they think I meant. And then I'm able to bridge the gap because I changed it in my mind, and then my words were softer. My words and my actions displayed an empathy, a collaboration, an openness for the person that works for me.
That's so good. It made me think of our natural tendency is to make assumptions and
Mhm.
to then act on as though those assumptions are true, right? My husband's lazy. They just don't want to deliver what I want them to. And it's so true. Capturing that thought, oh, that's so important because then you can look at it from a different perspective of ownership. I love that you're calling
Mhm.
that out in us leaders to take ownership and say, you know what, maybe I didn't communicate it clearly enough.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's an unspoken expectation where I haven't communicated it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
So,
I have worked with organizations where their assumption is that the person knows what their job involves, and
mhm.
yet there isn't even a job role, a job specification, and nothing that tells that person what is actually the standard of my role. Yes, but they know. How do they know? How do you know that they know? So I mean, communication can go off on a million tangents, but just to bring it back to the words and the voice and the communication, it
Mhm.
is important about the words, but it also is important about the fact that those words then breathe into the behavior, the action, the physical stance that we have. Physiology is really important.
Yes.
When we're going into a difficult situation, if we go in hunched down because our mind has said this is going to be terrible, my voice becomes terrible. I speak death over the situation. I go in hunched over. I'm already lost. I've
Mhm.
already lost.
Yeah.
If I think to myself, do you know what? This is just a conversation. And I might have to become really humble, and I might have to apologize. And I might have, but you know what? It's going to be a great outcome. When I start to speak that, I sit differently. I walk in differently. I smile. I'm open, and it enables somebody else to be more open with me. So
Mhm.
without a doubt, the way that we think and the words that we say and the way that we hold ourselves allows another person to communicate also with us in a more open and friendly and positive way.
So true. It's all connected and it
Definitely.
starts with how we think about things. Going back to action number one, capture those thoughts. Are you speaking? I love how you said that. Are you speaking things over people, even if it's just in your mind? Because you start to believe it. My husband's lazy. I
Mhm.
mean, my wife is so dramatic. Whatever that statement
Mhm.
is, you're speaking it out and you're starting to believe that. And that's leading to you acting and speaking as though that is true. And so,
Absolutely.
what can we do when we're in situations? Maybe we are working in tough environments. Maybe they're not toxic. I know that's kind of a trigger word for some people, but it doesn't matter. We step into a conflict, a hardship, something. How can we capture those thoughts so that we don't just start blurting out all of those words of
Yeah,
speaking kind of like death to the situation?
absolutely. I mean, there's so many things we can do. Um, First and foremost, the word I like to use the most is intentional.
Mm,
If you're going to want to be the best leader that you can be, and you want to create the best leaders around you, you have to be intentional. The difficulty with that is it comes alongside with vulnerability. And it's not human nature to want to be vulnerable with people, to want to let them into, because we fear hurt.
mhm.
EQ is a huge topic, isn't it? Emotional quotient. In business and in leadership, we talk about IQ. And the reason we talk about IQ more than EQ is because IQ can be measured so clearly. It's black and it's white.
Yeah.
Whereas EQ is, and I hate the phrase, but softer skills frustrates me to death because they are the hardest skills. They are by far to master. But we leave them to the side because they're the hardest. We by nature procrastinate. We have to be intentional. We have to plan and be intentional. When we're going to have a conversation, we have to catch ourselves. It's practice and it's habits.
Mhm.
As I said at the beginning with the quote there about habits and words and habits, it is about habits. It becomes our character as we start to, walk in the better way of doing things. And so I think we have to start with that. We have to start with thinking, who am I? Carl Jung, and I'm again pronounced names all incorrectly, I'm sure, but he says whatever irritates us as leaders, whatever really irritates us, actually probably drives us most to understand ourselves. And I think that's fantastic. When I'm feeling myself frustrated and hairs on the back, I mean, and I am by no means perfect in what I teach, is I'm teaching myself daily,
Aren't we all?
yeah, a work in progress.
Yeah.
But as I step into something and I'm frustrated, I've had a situation today. I've been frustrated, overcome with emotion, wanting to say, right, that's it. Why should I put up with that? And I have to catch myself and say, Michelle,
Mhm.
stop. How can I better organize my thoughts so that I can enter into the discussion that is difficult in the right way? So that
Mhm.
I can try to understand them first. I mean, I know that Stephen R. Covey is one of your favourites, Bethany, and I've heard you speak about him many times. And he just talks about, doesn't he? Seek first to understand, then, to understand. Seek first to understand yourself, then to understand others.
Yeah,
So it has to start with us as a leader. We have to start to understand who we are
it does.
so
And you
that
know
we
what?
can think more positively.
Totally. And going back to what you started out in the very beginning, this is a process. You
Oh,
know, I love how you started at early 20s, over 250 employees. I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, and I learned really quickly what not to do. And then I
mm,
learned that, leadership is not a title, it's influence, and it's engaging with people and understanding what they need to be influenced for good, not bad.
yeah,
Hopefully,
mm,
all the leaders out there, you can
yeah,
influence for bad too, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah. But
you
in
can.
thinking of that growth mindset of all of the things that we're talking about, just because you don't have the skill set today doesn't
Mhm,
mean that you can't grow it. This is where growth mindset and abundance thinking comes in. You
yeah,
can learn this, but it's a process and you got to give yourself grace in that. You're not going to be walking out batting 1,000, right? Having
no.
a perfect percentage score of I always communicate well. That's 100% no for me on my end.
Yeah, yeah,
There's still times where the flesh gets me and I come out with, more emotion than I do with, okay, oops, I spiraled too quickly. I didn't capture my thought on that one. That one got loose. And so allow yourself to grow, start recognizing that's the emotional intelligence
yeah,
piece is that
mm,
self-awareness so
Mm.
that you can capture it. And I love it. It's all coming together of how you
Mm.
started this episode and then what you were just teaching us on. It's so connected.
I think one of the most important things that I think about when I think about leadership and communication is that the first person we have to lead is ourselves. So,
Hmm.
we can't even begin to try and lead other people, try and lead in our home, try and lead in our community or with our family or our friends if we can't lead ourselves. And you can't lead yourself if you're not being intentional and aware.
Mm.
I heard a beautiful phrase not long ago, and I mean, I stand by this anyway, which was, even at home, the words you speak over your children, for example, becomes their own inner voice. And you
Ooh.
don't realize the influence you have as a leader over the people that you manage. You can be busy and they can ask you something, and you could be flippant. But what you've done is you've spoken words that feed into their inner voice. Every time I go to speak to Michelle, she hasn't got time for me. Every time I go to speak to Michelle, she's busy. Every time I go to speak to Michelle, she hasn't got time today. And she said that work's not quite up to scratch because what she hasn't done is taken the time to frame it. We do the same when we communicate an email, Bethany, and this drives me mad. Somebody will write me an email and I can tell that it's,
Yeah.
I've just got to get that. Listen, we're all busy. But if you just write your email, take 2 minutes
Mhm.
intentionally to reread it, even just to top and tail it. Now, everybody that listens to this podcast who gets an email off me will then have a little look back at their emails and say, I see. That's
Mhm.
why she started it with, hi, how was your day? Hope you're okay. Because I have to be intentional sometimes when
Mhm.
I'm busy about the words that I'm speaking. Because if I want people to be receptive to me, then I've got to be warm, inviting,
Mhm.
and open to building that relationship. And that's what communication is. It's influencing, it's motivating, it's supporting, it's lifting people up. And if I'm not speaking life into every situation, then as I said in my chosen verse, I'm speaking death. And I don't want to do that. I want to
Yeah.
raise up people. I don't want to knock them down. And I don't think that anybody I've ever met really wants to knock people down. It's not
Mhm.
an intention.
It's a
And that's
lack of awareness.
it's a lack of awareness.
Mhm.
So, I mean, definitely I spend a lot of time doing corporate leadership, corporate communication, corporate culture. It has a massive influence and impact on me because I've been bullied out of several jobs. And it brought me to my knees where I gave up corporate career, decided to go contracting for a while, thought that would be the best thing because I wouldn't be giving my heart away. That's how I felt. As you can see, I'm high EQ. I wouldn't be giving my heart away. But what I found actually was it doesn't matter where I am, what
Mhm.
situation I'm in, permanent, contracting, home, community, local shops. There will always be a situation where I need to be intentional in the way I lead myself. And
Mhm.
it has to start there. So I found, those things are always going to happen. People are always going to come along that don't like you. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like your style. That's okay. You can accept that. But what you first need to do, and I teach this to my children daily, if something isn't going right, conflict, just look in the mirror.
Mhm.
First and foremost, the only person you can change in that situation is yourself. The only
Yeah.
thoughts that you can change are your own.
Yeah.
When we start to change our thoughts, we change our action. We change our words, we change our action. This is, seen absolutely clearly when we think about psychology, like CBT training, not that I'm particularly into that, but I understand the psychology behind it, being that our emotions impact our actions.
Mhm.
And that comes again, I believe all truth is God's truth, but it comes from the fact that what we think is what we speak, is how we feel.
Yeah.
We've all heard it, haven't we? We've all said it. That's
Yeah.
made me so mad.
Michael Jackson sings about it. Man in the Mirror.
Yeah, man in the mirror,
Yeah.
quite. But my children will say, I said, why did you do that? They made me so mad.
Yeah.
Well, okay, they made you mad, but you
Mhm.
chose to act in the way you acted. You
Yeah.
chose to communicate in the way you communicate. We
Yeah.
can all change that with intentional thinking, intentional living. I truly believe that.
So
100%.
good. So it in thinking of because you're sharing, I mean, so much wisdom. I feel like every sentence is like, I need you to say it again and again and again so that I hear it, right? I need to hear it like 8 times so I can just ingest it. But looking at communication, communication is the most essential skill of
Mm,
leadership.
mm.
Without communication and understanding, there's usually just influence for the negative. You're
Yeah,
speaking that
yeah.
death over things, right? So we want it to be positive. We want it to be light. But so much of how we communicate
Mm,
says more about us as a leader. And can you just kind of think of so far all of the things that you've said for us internally? Our
mhm.
thoughts become our, words, and our words, our actions, habits, character, all the things. What does our communication really say about us as a leader? Can you kind of help us, everything that you've shared, just tie that into a bow before we move on into deeper talking about others?
I can definitely try. But I think, our character and our integrity is really everything about being a leader. You see, people act and say they're a leader by title. And sometimes they can be appear to be a leader who has integrity when everything is working well.
Mhm.
But what happens is if we haven't literally delved into understanding of ourselves, if we haven't really taken the time, if we haven't really understood ourselves, when those frustrating, difficult times come, the reality of who we are as a leader shines through.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if, and I'm sure you have heard of Amy Edmondson. She's a professor for Harvard, and she talks about psychological safety. And I love this. As a leader, everything about us fits into that category for me. My team, my family, my friends, my community, my children, they cannot feel safe emotionally if I am not displaying psychological safety for them. And I mean by that, it makes them feel comfortable. It's a
Yeah.
safe space emotionally. It's all well and good for, the training on the hard skills. That's great. But that psychological safety is something that we put in place intentionally. So we have to think that way in order to embrace that. When we embrace that, people feel safe. They then feel they can take risks. They haven't got fear. They feel, there's a freedom in that. Moving away from micromanagement of leadership and all those other things that can come into it. But if we communicate in a way that makes people feel safe,
Mhm.
we will build those relationships stronger. We will see people flourish. And, for me, there's no greater exciting thing than to see somebody flourish because we have allowed them to see the beauty in themselves.
Oh, we've allowed them to see the beauty in themselves. Oh, I love that statement. I love it so much. You know, everything that you're talking about, and I read this in the bio. I mean, this is what you work on, helping people become aware of those nuances of the micro behaviors we have.
Mm,
You've mentioned it. It's our body language, it's the words
mm,
that we say, it's our
mm.
facial expressions, it's our tone, it's how we write those emails, y'all. Uh, is it just straight to the point, or do we actually, acknowledge that we're talking to a human being who also has a lot of things and probably like hundreds of other emails in their inbox? And so those micro behaviors matter. And I just love that you're tying all that up and saying, take a hot second, be intentional. And the email is like the perfect example. If you need to start there, start there. Type the facts, type the things that just I need to get it out, and then stop
Yeah.
and then take a hot second and be intentional of how can I communicate this in a way in which it can be received, in a way
Mm.
that respects, who they are, where they're at, provide clarity, all of the things. And it's the same whether we're talking about that email at work or with our children at home. And I love that you're bringing in all of these home examples because it's the same skill set.
Same.
Everybody hear that communication. Don't be a good communicator at work because you're intentional and then let it all go when you get to your house.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It needs
Continue
to
that.
start at home, Bethany.
Yes.
Really. It needs to start. It starts with ourselves and then who we are, sort of ripple effect out into everything that we do. But we can't be an example at work if we're not an example at home. I don't
Mhm.
believe we can be two people.
Yeah.
I used to talk about having my work overcoat on. And in many ways, and for some skills, that's true.
Mhm.
At home, I am a different leader. At home, I choose to be. Now, hold fire on me, all you wonderful women who might want to go, hang on a cotton picking minute. I choose to be a bit more submissive at home than I probably am in the workplace, because I like to be looked after. My husband likes to look after me, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm happy with that. I don't mind doing the cooking most of the time. He can do it. If he started to, kind of force the situation, I might change my mind. But as it happens, that's who I am at home. It's not the same leader as I am at work, because I need to be more assertive, and I need to be, but in my communication, in the intentionality of what I want to bring out of people around me, I need to be the same, because it should be who I am. And that's why working on yourself is so important. That's why when I said to you, oh, thank you for inviting me on this podcast, I wanted to talk about, thoughts, words, actions. It then leads us into the second thing, really, which is very much about, if I don't understand myself, how can I understand myself, and how can I be true and make that my core? Because then it just becomes a reflection of me. I'm back to the mirror analogy now, rather than just sort of looking in the mirror. I'm now talking about what is seen in the mirror. What do I see when I look in the mirror? About what do other people see reflecting in me? And is it true? Would people say, actually, Michelle's what she's speaking now, even on this podcast to you, that is true, actually. I have seen that play out about her. I would hate for anyone to say, well, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
It's a journey, don't get me wrong. People that I managed in my 20s, they might say, that's not a Michelle, But now I like to think that actually I'm always open and I'm always intentional. And even when I'm sending that little short message, Teams message or whatever, although I want to get something out of the communication, I also want to make sure that I give something back. You can always add value in a communication, even if it's to wish that person a good day, even if it's to, give that person, boost their value, help them understand their value. I like to, I use the terminology all the time. Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate you. I want them to know that they're valued. And I do that at home, and I do that at work.
And going back to psychological safety, think about this. This is, from the dawn of time, Maslow's hierarchy. And I say dawn of time, like the 40s and 50s. But, people need their physiological needs met. They need food, clothing, shelter, things like that. Then they need psychological safety. Then they need belonging. And then ultimately, you want them to have esteem. They know that they are seen and valued and loved. And that's usually where we operate in the workplace. That's usually not where our culture, creates that belonging, that psychological safety that we expect them to work as though they have it and move on and be successful and operate as their best selves, right? And it's so good what you're helping us understand is the internal work we have to do in being intentional, capturing our thoughts, and then how we speak over people. Do we recognize their humanness? Do we, pour out affirmation and psychological safety and value in them? And then ultimately, once you become more self-aware, you're going to start becoming aware of patterns of behavior and communication in other people. So let's assume everybody listening, myself included, they were all like, Michelle, awesome. I have become more self-aware because of what you're telling me. I'm capturing my thoughts. I'm kinder with my words. I'm speaking life and not death. But now I'm starting to notice, man, some other people, they don't have the skill set either. Help me, help them.
Help them. Absolutely. Well, it's really interesting because that I'm so hot on holistic leadership, and from a Michelle Claire Smith Limited perspective, which obviously is me, my name, we like to think of a person as a whole. You're not just stepping into work and stepping out. So we do corporate, we do family, we also do family communication. Teenagers and how they see themselves. We do courses called Rediscover Each Other for marriages, where I've watched it. The more aware of myself I've become, the more aware I've seen, you're both saying the same thing, but you're just not communicating. The words are passing each other because of you're not understanding each other. So how can we really dive into understanding ourselves and then helping others to understand us? and encouraging others to get to know themselves as well. You
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, Bethany, I'm a DISC consultant.
Yes.
I, like all of the leaders I'm sure that listen to your show, have done a myriad of behavioural analysis assessments, and I used to thrive on them. In fact, I encourage people to do one every year in some sort of psychological assessment fashion. And the reason I do that is because if we want to intentionally grow, we should see growth in that assessment. I wouldn't encourage you to do it any more often, but certainly once a year. The reason I love DISC assessment so much, and John Maxwell DISC assessment particularly, and that is important because there are several DISC assessments out there, is because it talks to the core of who you are without fear of anything being criticised. Now, by that, what I mean is there is no right or wrong.
Oh,
We are who we are.
say it louder for the people in the back.
There's no right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. At work, we were often, I through my 20s and 30s probably, I was always taught, yes, these are your strengths, work on your weaknesses. And it used to infuriate me. Not least of all because my weaknesses were my weaknesses because A, I have absolutely no interest in Excel spreadsheets or, analysis of deep calculations. I want you to tell me the outcome and then I'll use it in a decision. But that's not my interest. So as I grew and as I understood myself more, I understood that actually work on your strengths. Be everything that's brilliant about yourself and allow somebody else who's brilliant in the things you're not to be brilliant in themselves.
Yes.
So DISC assessments are phenomenal at pulling out, where am I good? Where do I excel? How do other people see me? How do I see myself? And how do I react under pressure? I.e., who am I really?
Oh.
And what's important about that is as you see the analysis, there's my good communication, Bethany, coming out. As you see the analysis of yourself through a DISC assessment, what you see is how that performs with the role you're doing, whether you're suited in the situation you're in. It doesn't tell you anything that you don't already know.
Yes.
But what it does is it highlights it for you. It puts it in a format that allows you to intentionally change and grow, or to allow other people, as you share your preferences, to be able to understand your communication style. It's so important because you might have a boss who just wants to know the finite details, and you are a talker like me. And I go to him and I say, well, there's this, and I'll floral. I've been called that before. I'm flowery, my floral, my language. I want to use 1,000 words for one because it's all beautiful and he doesn't care. And in fact, I'm frustrating him to death because what he wants to know is A, B, C, Michelle, and when will it be done? Well, if he understands me more and if I understand him more, I am able to give him what he wants and he's able to see me more clearly.
Yes.
The same goes with all of our friends and all of our colleagues and all of our teams. One of the things, that we offer is a free lunch and learn. We call it a lunch and learn, but it could be an hour of anybody's time, where we talk to people, teams, anybody, about the fundamental 4 areas of DISC communication: dominance, influence, security and safety, and compliance. We've all got a little bit of all of those things in us, but we do tend to have a favourite, if you like. There's an element of us that favours one of those or 2 of those elements. And once you start to unpick it, it can change your world. And for me, with DISC assessment, John Maxwell DISC assessment, it really changed things for me. It changed the way I operate with my colleagues, but it really changed my marriage. And I was surprised at that. I had a good marriage before. It wasn't, there weren't any sort of red flags. But what I noticed was if I approached my husband in a slightly different way, the value I got back was tenfold. And I noticed that at work too. To first understand ourselves really then enables other people to understand us and for us to understand them as well. It's the start of all of our growth, without a doubt.
It is so good. And just hearing you say all of that, All I could think of is, yes, the same with my husband. He's told me multiple times, especially earlier in our marriage, because I'm a talker and I'm an auditory processor. I'm going to think
Uh-huh.
my thoughts out loud. And then as I talk, I will get to the point in my own mind. I don't even know my
Yeah.
own point yet,
Yeah.
right? And he'll be like, land the plane, Bethany, land the plane.
Yeah. What are you
and
trying to
it,
say? What are you trying
yeah.
to say?
And it's taught me to do a lot of processing before I speak with him so that I can
Mhm.
land my plane a little bit faster. But he's also learned patience of, okay, she's not a Tory processor. And
Yeah.
oh, I just love what you're saying, that it helps connect. Communication is giving, it's putting out, but then also receiving. And that's where the understanding comes in.
Mm.
And so often I will think I'm saying something, but they're not receiving it because
No,
it's not in a way
no.
that it can be received.
Yeah,
And so communication is really going to help you in your leadership and every single relationship that you have, marriage,
absolutely.
children, all the things,
Mm.
friends, community. I I love it and it's so important. So going through that disc, I've attended your lunch and learn. Now, granted, you are 6 hours ahead of me, so I was drinking my coffee while y'all were all having lunch. But it was so fabulous as you were explaining the disc. And I'm also certified in disc, so I have an understanding of it, but you are the consultant level, like you know this stuff inside and out. And I got so much from it that I could immediately turn around and utilize in my own company, with
Mm.
my own team,
Mm.
and my family. So what can you kind of, without giving away, all the things, because guys, I want you to schedule a lunch and learn with Michelle. It's fabulous. And 25% of the listeners here on the podcast are Europe based, international. So the 25% of y'all that are out there in Europe, please go to Michelle. But, you know, can you just kind of walk us through the disc and how
Mhm.
just knowing ourselves and
Mhm.
knowing the patterns of behavior can
Yeah,
positively impact how we communicate from here on out with everybody at
of
work
course.
and at home?
Of course. I mean, I can just give a little appraise around what the four areas relate to, and that will probably be a really great start. And I think even some of your listeners will already start to think, oh, yeah, I recognize that in myself, or I
Yeah.
recognize that in those around me. And the basis of DISC itself is patterns. It's patterns of communication. It's patterns of behavior. I always relate it to the fact that when you want to buy a new car, and it's a blue, I don't know, BMW or whatever it might be. The minute you see that car everywhere. You didn't
So
see
true.
it before, but now everyone's got one. It's the same with disc. Once you recognize the patterns, you can't help but see them everywhere. So I'll just talk to those patterns. D, dominance, is about being a very decisive person. They have fears. Their fears are generally around being taken advantage of. And, you can see that sort of person tends to be authoritative. It could be a person in the home that just likes to make quick decisions, often called upon when people are in a quandary and they're not quite sure what to do. That person will make a decision, full facts or not,
Mhm.
but they want to get to a conclusion. They like to be helpful, as in they want to solve the situation. So that's a D. You'll recognize them because they want to make that decision, and sometimes they even make the decision when you haven't asked them for one.
So true.
But you'll see that come out. But they don't want to be taken advantage of. That's really important. They don't want you to ask them a question and then kind of steal their ideas, for example.
Mhm.
So it's important to understand that as well. The way I think about a D is if you want to get something out of them, you would say to them, no, this cannot be done. And that person is so dominant and so wanting to deliver, I love these D words, that they will find hell or high water to deliver that thing to you, that decision. Because if it cannot be done, they will prove it can be done.
Yes.
They're very task orientated as well. And so it's not about emotion. There's no emotion in that. They just want to get the task done. From an I perspective, they're an influencer. They're a chatterbox. I'm high I. Bethany, I know you're high I.
Yes, I am.
We love people. It's people, people, people all day long. But we don't really have the same focus on task. Now, I'm being very broad brush here because we have other things with our eye.
Yeah.
But we would be wanting to go 100% forward if somebody said to us, Bethany, Michelle, There's only you can do this. We would take that mantle on. We would want to make sure that we wouldn't want to let you down because we love you. And so as a leader, if somebody comes to me and says, Michelle, it's only you, I am working 24/7 to make sure that I deliver that for you. And so once you recognize that I person, chatterboxes, loving people, generally quite positive, you can know how to approach them to get something done. Their biggest fear, as an I, is generally around not kind of being good enough for somebody or letting them down, being dismissed and just not having any value. It's a fear.
Yeah.
Then we move on to S, safety. Now, the thing about safety that I love is it literally covers 67% of the entire population. So most of us want safety and security. And, in the environment we're in now, financial or otherwise, people are always concerned about the safety, security of their job. And actually what you find with high S's is if you're not very aware of that as a leader, you'll often find their response is going to be one that is what you want to hear. Because they will want to keep everybody happy.
Yes.
They will want everybody to feel secure in the situation. And if you approach them and say, look, if we don't get this done, it's going to be a really unhappy ride. They're going to want to get it done because they want everyone to be happy. They fear losing their job. They fear falling out with people. They fear conflict. Most of us do.
Yeah.
And then finally, the C of DISC, which is compliance. And I mean, definitely my husband's quite high on compliance. And this is about, but that's the law and that's the process and that's the way it's done around here. And if you want to get somebody that's high C to change the way they work, you've got to talk to them about, altering the process to be more powerful. You've got to talk to them about if we don't get this done, we won't hit that deadline. They'll want to hit that deadline. Their fear is that, they'll be caught not performing to the level of the process, not to get the percentage of the KPI. So it's really important. And once you recognize those simple patterns, you can then change the way you approach them to get the best out of them, but also so that they can hear you and that you can hear them, which is important.
The beauty of everything that you just said, and you said this earlier, is the goal with DISC or other, personality assessments or those deep dives, maybe it's Enneagram, something else. It's not to say one is better than the other. You need all of them. Your team needs all of those, but it's learning how to understand yourself and what your typical need is and what your typical go-to and how you communicate. I'm an I'm going to be very people-y. I'm going to be very all about your emotions and making you feel a certain way. But once you recognize that, that, okay, as I communicate, even though I'm an I'm going to have elements of an I am talking to some D's out there, some S's, some C's. I need to be able to communicate so that the message connects with all of them.
Absolutely.
And that is huge. So again, what I hope you're hearing out of this is no one personality style, behavior style, communication style is better than the other. It's all about being aware of where you're at and your natural behaviors, but then recognizing those simple patterns in others so that you can connect better with them. And that, my friends, Michelle, is why I call you the guru of leadership. The simple patterns make such a huge difference. It's like putting on a pair of glasses where I can finally see people as God had created them so that I can connect with them better. Whether it be my team, my husband, my children, or my family. So good. Michelle, I just adore you. I love the work that you're doing and what you're doing to serve people, because at the heart of relationships is communication, and it will make or break anybody's leadership. It will sink your ship if you don't have good communication. So in all of the wisdom that you've shared with us, what are some key takeaways for our listeners that they need to apply so that they can grow in their communication and leadership?
I think in the whole conversation we've had today, I think I would very much start by saying, take a moment to think about what your mind is saying that is coming out of your mouth. What you speak over yourself. And as Joel Osteen said, if you want to know what your life looks like in 5 years' time, listen to what you're saying now.
Ooh.
And that is true of how you're speaking over people too. So just take a moment to reflect on your day. Think about the different scenarios that you've gone through, be it at the shops, the encounter you had with the person you paid, or, the postman, or whatever it is. Think about that, and then just think about, how was I feeling when I entered into that communication realm? How was I standing? How was I acting? What words was I saying that caused the person to respond in that way to me? Hopefully it was positive. Hopefully you've had a fantastic day and it's positive learnings. But if you're anything like me, some things are short and sharp and you have to reflect on them. And it is a constant growing thing. No one gets good at communication overnight. But it is by far the one thing that all the research I've ever done and all the questions I've ever asked comes back to me as communication is poor. So the first thing I would really want to recap is, look at yourself, think about what you're thinking, think about what you're speaking, think about how that's affecting your behavior, and then pull yourself in line, because it is about doing that. Have a firm hand with yourself, pull yourself in line. In order to be a good leader in the first place, you have to have a growth mindset. You said that earlier, Bethany, and you're so right. And so to have a growth mindset, you've got to understand your baseline. Yeah. What is my baseline? That's the second thing I'd want people to have as a takeaway. As a leader, how do I communicate? Be brave. Ask people. And it is brave. Do I communicate well? Do you always understand what I have asked you to do? Or do you understand? Or do you have to get other people to explain it again to you? Or do you have to seek, extra information or whatever? Find out from others and at home. Find out from others at home. Ask your children. Be open to what they're going to say to you so that you first can understand yourself. And then thirdly, I would say, really investing some time and, an assessment like DISC. I mean, we love to help you, but invest in yourself. Because if you want to grow, take it seriously. Mm-hmm. Take your communication seriously. Because it literally will impact every relationship you have. And every relationship you have at work will bring extra value to you. And extra value to you and your relationship will ultimately bring other things to the business, like profitability, success will come from relationships. I always remember one key thing that was taught to me very early on when I was first in sales, actually. And I was taught this: people buy people.
Ooh, that's
They
good.
don't buy products. There's nothing different from the pencil I sell you to the pencil you can buy at the shop, but you will buy it from me because you have engaged and connected with me. And that's because I've taken the time to understand myself and I've taken the time to understand you. And that is the bottom line of communication.
I love it. It's so good. So, I have to assess it in my own mind. What I heard you say is, one, just take a hot second and just reflect. Start to get to know how you're acting within the day. And then find your baseline. How do I tend to communicate? And ask people. Your children will be honest with you.
They will.
That may be a good place to start. They're going to be the most brutal. People at work may not be as honest unless it's psychologically safe. And then invest. We all want to be great leaders. But if we don't invest in that personal development to become a great leader, then we're just wishing, right? It's not you got to make a goal. You got to have a plan. You got to invest, put some money where your mouth is. If you really want to become better, buy the book, listen to the podcast, take some action on that. I love it. And then I just love it. Just as an extra bonus, people don't buy products. People buy people. Oh, that's such a good thing. So kind of looking at, I want to flip the opposite. What is one poor decision that you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, come on, people, don't do this thing. You're better than that. So what is one poor decision?
I mean, there are so many, aren't there? But in communication, I genuinely think that the worst decision we can ever make is to assume that we've been understood. Ooh. And assume that we have understood. Mm-hmm. Clarity, seek clarity. Seek to ask people if they've understood you, and seek to clarify that you have understood. It's the biggest problem with communication. I've seen it in the workplace and at home, where we assume. So the one mistake that we make all the time is assume that we've communicated. It's back to the beginning, when I said, George Bernard Shaw, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Don't assume.
That's so good. We have now come full circle, and that's how you know it's a good episode. When you end where you began. It's so, so good. Michelle, I adore you. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your work? Where can we go to hire you for that lunch and learn so we can learn more about DISC, because it will absolutely change the teams in your organization. So where can we go and find you?
Yeah, you can just nip across to our website, which is www.michelleclairesmith.com, and you'll find all sorts of information on there. I'm at LinkedIn. I think that you're going to pop that somewhere on the podcast, are you, Bethany?
Yes, I will.
The LinkedIn site. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. Coming up soon will be a new podcast. So I know lovely Bethany has been helping me with that. You see, find yourself a coach. That's what I said. But, pop along. Keep up to date. We have a membership on our website that keeps you updated with new things, new products. And we do lots of things for free. We want to send you a mini assessments that are going to help you in your everyday life. We want to do lunch and learns for free to build value into your team. So please pop along, book a session. Don't be shy. It doesn't come with any strings. There is coaching, there are programs. Obviously, we want you to invest in yourselves in a more formal fashion, but if you're just wondering and you just want to sort of reach out and investigate a little bit more, just pop along, have a little free time with us. Please do that.
Absolutely. You're so giving. And guys, I'll have links in the show notes. She does have some free assessments and things that she's given away to you so that you can dive into this. Again, communication will make or break your leadership. So definitely take advantage of these free links, these free assessments, and her free lunch and learns are absolutely fabulous. So attend those as well. Michelle, thank you so much for your time, your heart, for helping us just be better people who communicate. I mean, it's affecting not just our workplaces of work, but our homes as well. And I love that you're helping us be better everywhere we go.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Man. All right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit.